Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. My name's Sasha. I'm a staff product designer for the design system team at GitLab. And today I will talk a bit about templates. Note that some of the things I will show you are more mature than others. So some of the things are highly work in progress still. I want to open up this with a statement which was made during Project Studio. So the goal for Project Studio was to move the product experience from a traditional website to an enterprise-grade application. That was with the introduction of the panel layout and other small adjustments. That was like one of the goals. But there were some problems we did face throughout like Project Studio and in an extension with Project Sneak Peek. Rather multiple problems, but like one overarching problem. So during like Project Sneak Peek, we highlighted that the absence of defined templates as a major source of inconsistency and inefficiency across the product experience. What we mean by that is that we have a lot of different experiences which are very similar, but ever so slightly different, right? But we don't share like a base foundation in terms of like a source you can take on to build your features on, but rather slap everything together with like classes. Everything is custom built. Potentially every team owns their own stack, and multiple teams have like a very similar stack they own, which in its own will lead to inconsistency and inefficiency in terms of like maintenance, for example. So this causes like redundant decision making as well by teams, fragmented layouts, and a high cognitive load for users navigating between pages. What I mean by that is that I think like a very famous example, a very simple example as well, might be if you have like a sidebar, which we have on a lot of variety of pages, the toggle, or if there is a toggle to show and hide it, might be there, might be in different locations, and works completely different from a responsive point of view, right? Throughout like different devices, different breakpoints. This is also because we don't have a shared base foundation for that layout, rather teams owning their own stack, right? So this is like where the fragmented layout comes from. There is no easy way to adjust to a new design direction without massive migrations over and over again. So that is one of the learnings from Project Studio. And now we're proposing more migrations because we're proposing to migrate to use shared templates, right? But I think there is no way around like another round of migrations, but eventually, this will help in the future if we adapt to new design patterns and, like adapting the design language further. So the solution, or one solution, is establishing a core set of reusable, consistent layout templates and patterns that will help align the product and enable the rollout of a more modernized design direction. So there are like a bunch of things we already rolled out. There were some things which were out of scope. Some of them we, like try to take on with Project Sneak Peek. Some of them will just, be in the backlog. But all in all, like these are some things we try to do to get more consistent, to get, like faster to market, for teams to build new pages easier and faster, with like a foundation of templates. So we look through the whole product and trying to identify like patterns for templates. And there were like a variety of things we could do, but we actually wanted to start very small. So we will just introduce 2 templates at the beginning. But these 2 templates are so generic that potentially, a high load of our product could actually adapt those templates. And these 2 templates are what we call the index template and the content template. So the index template, for example, like the name suggests, is for an index page. So where you always have like a list of things. Potentially, it's like an overview page. You show like a list of items. You have like a search functionality, filter functionality. Pretty basic. You might have a pager as well. On the other hand, we have a content page, which is like a node which has high density information on it on a specific topic. Might be like an issue or a merge request, you name it. So with these two templates, we potentially can already cover quite a bit of the product. But as I mentioned, we already know that down the line, we would have to add more templates. For example, a great example might be like a settings template, right? There's like ongoing settings work. This could benefit from having like a base settings template to make things easier, to adapt like settings and to make this more consistent across. And then potentially like flipped layouts where we have the sidebar on the left side, like the wiki page is using, just to name a few. So let's start with the index template, right? This is rather simple. So we might have like different regions, like an optional header region, a content region, a footer region, right? It's nothing groundbreaking, but the template itself will steer like or handle like the responsive behavior, the spacing between the different regions, just to allow like an easy starting point to build like these index pages. If we translate that to like a page in the product, I use like the pipeline page as an example here. It doesn't look vastly different than what we have today. And that's actually the goal behind it, right? So as a first iteration, we want to stay as close as possible to what we have today. And then we can build on top of that to provide more features and more experiences. On the other hand, we have the content template. So this is a bit more complicated, even though it looks also fairly easy. So we have a header region, we have a content region, we have a sidebar region, which might be optional as well. But the core part here is that the functionality to being able to toggle the sidebar to show and hide it will be baked into the template. So the whole application logic behind toggling the sidebar, displaying it, the responsive behavior, when does it show as an overlay or like as like a drawer, can all be handled by the template itself. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel and build all those things, like those foundational things, on your own. If you translate that to like a design, again, very subtle changes here, but plus minus, it resembles what we have today in the product, right? The other thing we would like to add to the content template is actually that we handle like stuff like the sticky header inside of the template. So to get more consistent with that, the template itself does not define any information which is shown in different regions or the sticky header. So this would be up to the design DRI to decide. We place like a title and meta information and which meta information in there. It's more of like the abstraction of the behavior and like when it appears and how it appears, potentially like the animations and stuff, just like the foundational layer. If you shrink that down from a responsive behavior, as an example, yeah, like this, the sidebar at some point needs to be shown above like the content. So again, will all be baked into the template itself. All right, so this is all not rocket science, what I'm telling here, right? It's pretty streamlined, it's pretty easy. It's just another migration. But there's something else we want to work on, or we try to do. And that actually originates from Studio and Sneak Peek, which didn't make the cut yet into the the new universe of the palette layout, which are integrated controls. So if you look at that, this pretty much resembles what we have today with like the multi-panel layout. Like the static panel has like the breadcrumb as the panel header, and then you have like a page title, some page actions, filtering options. Pretty much this could be migrated to like the index template, right? Then in the middle, we see the dynamic panel, which we can already see the first inconsistency. The panel header actually uses like kind of a slug between the project name and like the ID. It actually might be a bad example because like these are pretty aligned already between the two. We have like other experiences in the product which look way off in terms of placement from like action buttons and stuff. But I get you pretty much get like what I'm talking about. So we would transform this into like migrating to templates into this. So what if I move forward back, you can see that the density increases. So this is a lot more dense. I can also show you a side by side because we're actually migrating multiple headers into a unified header, right? So we're moving page actions on top. We're making it more dense by using the space which is available, which was also like one thing we heard throughout like rolling out like the panel layout in the feedback issues is that we increase the use of vertical space. And with that, we can actually mitigate that problem a bit so that we can, like merge multiple sticky headers into a single unified experience. So the anatomy of that is that we, on the top left of like the template, we would have like what I call a panel identifier, which is like a hybrid between a breadcrumb, and this is like the highly work in progress part. So we have like various variants, what we want to show. If you actually want to show the breadcrumb and just use the breadcrumb component, which automatically collapses depending on the space, or if this would be like a like a simplified variant. And then we have, for the index template, for example, we would show the page title. So another duplication we can remove. So we don't need to have another H1 shown. We can just show one. And then for the content template, it would be the identifier, which in this case would be like the work item ID. Then followed by page actions, right? These are like the global page actions. They will always be visible, always be sticky, and additionally or optionally, you can group them, right? This looks very similar or familiar with like any traditional window management, right? Like think of one panel being a window in your operating system, and we're just trying to name the window, providing you like the global actions and baked-in functionality. But what happens if we have a ton of actions, right? So these actions would actually automate, like there would be like a functionality built in that they automatically collapse into like this overflow menu. So there might be a maximum of visible actions you can place, but on a responsive behavior, especially if you roll out like user resizable panels, like users can shrink them down to like a mobile-ish experience. So we need to have like the mechanics to actually move all the actions into like an overflow menu to avoid the stacking of buttons we have today, which eventually will just, eat up like 1/3 of your screen. So that's just like a nicer solution to the same problem. Then the built-in template actions, like this is the content template. So it has like the sidebar because we're on a work item, which has a sidebar. So you can actually, like show and hide it. And then we have the contextual panel actions, which currently are restricted for the AI panel and the dynamic panel, which is closing the dynamic panel or, like taking over the full screen experience, going to like the, like to the detail page, like navigating there. This could also be in a future setting, we don't know yet, that we will bring those to the static panel as well. So if you close the static panel, the dynamic panel would become the static panel and you can open something else. the reason why we show the project on the left side is also because the context matters, right? So there are cases where you're on a work item and you have linked items from a different project or from a different, even from a different group, and you click on it, like the work item will be your static panel, the panel you see on the left, and then you have a complete different context open in the middle in the dynamic panel. So this is a signifier that you have like two different contexts open. And then speaking of like this experience was built in a mobile first experience, even though I showed you desktop screens for simplification, but this actually is just like one single experience across different devices, across different breakpoints. And that was actually like one of the goals here with like these adaptions. It also opens the way for additional features we explored in Sneak Peek, like this contextual switcher. So, like when we eventually will redesign the navigation, there will be changes as well to how you can actually switch between different contexts, which might be different projects, your own space, settings might be another one, groups, or whatever we replace groups with. So these are currently like things which we can just open up with like these changes. All right, in a summary, so the template work will unify the product experience. So it's more predictable and more consistent layouts. So users can always predict where I am on the top left, what I can do globally speaking on the top right. You have the controls of the panel as well in the top right corner. We can centralize the app logic, so ease of maintenance, a faster building. So your teams don't have to reinvent the wheel for like those basic features over and over again. We can also use that as a tool to accelerate the adaptation of the multi-panel layout, right? That's another thing. That was one of the restrictions of Project Studio was for two reasons. Like one was timing, the other one was because work items was just fully migrated to Vue. So it was for us way easier to adapt to a multi-panel layout, whereas other parts of our product do lag behind that. So again, we're down to migrations. Yay, right? And it also provides an easier upgrade path in the future. So whenever we do global design iterations and adjustments to the product, with this shared basic foundation of these templates, it will allow us to move faster in terms of like design language and changes. All right, here's a rough timeline. Trademark, this could change. We started with Project Studio and Sneak Peek in between Q2 and Q3 last year. Then we started with the exploration of templates in Q4. 18.8 was the setting direction, first round of feedback from design DRIs. In 18.9, we want to gather more feedback to set the final direction. So please get involved, look at our Figma. Please reach out to me if you have any further questions, stuff you want to discuss. Do you see any shortcomings? Do you see any edge cases already? Let's discuss. And we would like to get a first iteration out at roughly the end of Q1. All right. Are there any questions?
I have a question. There's no questions in the doc, so we can just kick off with
sure.
free discussion. In 18.9, you mentioned getting involved. Would you like us to start pulling any templates from the Figma file that you shared to just see how it would work in our respective experiences? Or are you looking for feedback more of just providing comments and edge cases within the Figma file that you have?
Can be a combination of both. What works easier for all of you, right? Potentially just browsing through like the exploration we did, and like the various different options which are on the table still. You might get a glimpse of your specific area, and just take like one or two examples where we have like the edge cases. So I can think of edge cases being like I don't know, like in the project page itself, where we have like a ton of buttons in multiple rows. Like, how would that work in the era of like the panel layout and these templates? Or just like copy and pasting it and just trying it yourself, and then you might actually get into the questions afterwards because you just try it out. Both works for me. Depends on how much you want to invest in this and how much involved you want to be, but any feedback is welcome.
And then my last follow-up question related to that is, where would you like us to give feedback? Is there a centralized issue, or are you looking more for just free-flowing comments in the doc?
Um, we don't have yet like a specific document where you can provide feedback, but we can create that if that's the easiest way to do it. Otherwise, maybe just comments in Figma might be easier at this stage, but I leave that up to everyone to decide. So I don't have like a big preference when it comes to that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from folks on the call?
A quick question for me. Sasha, are you able to quickly or briefly rather just explain the feedback that you got around density? Because I think for all of us designing in the product, we have different use cases, personas, functional roles that we're designing for. And it's interesting to hear that feedback from, and I would love to know if you know what kind of role we're
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah. So if I rewind to this, so like the majority of the feedback in terms of like vertical spacing, like increased vertical spacing, was because we introduced like the top bar again with like the search and your user profile and all that, right? Like that
Mm,
specific level, while as not really using like the panel header for like we use it for orientation because the breadcrumb was there before, it's still there, but that is more a limiting factor because it was there before, so it's still there. Because we haven't migrated that rather away or like move that in any sense. So there was quite a chunk of our user base providing that feedback that with that additional layer on top, we actually added more stuff. So the already like like because like monitors usually if you use like a laptop or a screen or wider than tall, so we added another layer of complexity for them to take some words from some of the feedback we got with adding another bar on top, right?
mm,
But that was not by design. It was more because we didn't have like the tools to actually migrate that to the vision we already had in place, or we started out a vision where this would be occupied by something else, right?
mm,
So we're in this limbo state between old UI and new UI. Some bits are still from the old UI, but showing in the new UI. And I think like there comes like the feedback from because
okay.
it's like these things, right? We have like the top header from the application Chrome, then we have the panel header, then potentially here in this example of an issue, you would have another sticky header, and then on merge request, you might have an additional sticky header if you're on the diff page, for example. So we just have like a lot of real estate occupied by sticky headers and sticky elements in our UI. Does
Mm.
that make sense?
That makes total sense. Thank you. I think it's important for all of us to take heed to that. Sometimes vertical rhythming is not one of the primary things that we think about when working through
Yeah.
these. And it would be nice to have, a centralized template system. Will make it much easier for us to iterate. So I'm in line with Chad's comment in the chat.
Cool.